This is land that, has been singing and talking for tens of thousands of years, and we are very much only just starting to listen. Sovereignty was never ceded, and I pay my respects to First Nations people here today and on all the lands in which we meet today around Australia and beyond. Welcome to the Peggy Glanville-Hicks Address / panel for 2021. I am honoured to be here. You are learning today how 3 art music makers make their music. That's what it's all about today. Sia Ahmad, Zela Margossian, and Bree van Reyk. Each of them occupies a singular place in this little art music scene of ours. They're very different. They've got very different things to say. They work differently. And like any musicians of any kind, have managed to survive the last 18 months. Not to mention the black hole of arts funding in this country, $100 million gutted in 2015. In May, the Treasurer in his budget delivery speech didn't mention the arts once. There's no longer an arts communications department federally. Our wonderful art music scene and the entire arts industry sits alongside water grid planning and road safety and freight supply chains. That is where our art scene sits in the eyes of our government. But these artists and so many others are still making and inspiring, and they're going to show you how they compose, how they play, and what it's like for them to be making music right now. They're each going to talk to you, and then we're going to have a conversation about it. We're going to start with Sia Ahmad and this incredible world of sound Sia creates. A DIY punk autodidact, a curator and facilitator, dialed in from Ngunnawal country in Canberra today. You will delightedly fall down a rabbit hole listening to Sia's music. You can hear her voice, electronics, guitar, sounds that you can imagine and can't imagine in her creations. Her latest album, Facade, has only just come out, and so much of what she has made, she's made with others. Sia is a true collaborator. She is seemingly played everywhere and with everyone, like the Australian Art Orchestra, where she also directs. She is also on the board of Girls Rock Canberra. Sia Ahmad.
Thank you, Vanessa. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I work and live on, the Ngunnawal people, as well as the Ngambri, Ngaragu, and others who have traded on, travelled through and connected with this land and continue to do so. I recognise all custodians of country throughout all lands, waters and territories. I pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging, and remind all that sovereignty was never ceded. This address is a great opportunity to remind ourselves as artists and audience that we create in parallel to an important Indigenous cultural narrative that is as old as humanity has been on this continent and speaks of diverse stories important to all the nations across these lands. I was a teenage kid in a Belconnen bedroom, listening to the radio and poring over music magazines. I didn't have the aptitude for learning an instrument, but I had become hooked on ideas. Not theories, but a feeling on what music could be if made on instinct alone and with a nervous energy. I read about garage bands and loft gatherings. I read about positive mental attitude from Rasta punks. I read about a thief of fire, typical girls and the buffalo stance. I read about the moment raga drone took hold of rock and roll. I remember hearing Brimful of Asher on the radio and finding out they were a band that shared the same skin color as me, making references to Bollywood singers to dance-worthy funk. I remember the first time I heard the album Free Jazz and being in awe of the expressive freedom, hearing the different musical colors throughout the beautiful chaos. I would listen to everything, read about everything, and dream about these stories as mythic tales. I would dream about where my place in this could be. In being asked to speak as part of this year's Peggy Glanville-Hicks Address alongside Bree and Zela, I've been looking at why I do what I do and why I am where I am. Even before COVID lockdowns took hold, I had taken a step back from the notion of career to retrace my steps and arrive back at those formative discoveries and innocent dreams to guide me once again through my practice as a maker, facilitator, and mentor. My creative life is 100% tied to the DIY punk ethos I grew up with, and it is intrinsic to how I carry myself through life too. I left that childhood bedroom to graft all over the continent, then the world in a way that fits me best. I've spent years making the music that speaks closest to my heart, and through this process, I've been blessed to find myself sitting within a community that finds equal space for myself, those who I look up to, and those still finding their feet in the creative world, all of whom I can call a friend. Without punk rock, I wouldn't have found those like me and share a worldview that celebrates creativity in all its glories, flaws, and everything in between. Without punk rock, I wouldn't be reminded day in, day out, to find ways to break the system, then rebuild the structures better, so there's a chance to remain self-reliant and sustainable when things are at their lowest ebb. Without punk rock, I wouldn't keep thinking of ways to make creativity accessible to one and all, how to remove barriers so identity and social status were of no concern. Through all the lockdowns and restrictions, I've been lucky to continue my work in the arts sector with stability and be supported to keep creating music. But more importantly, I've been able to use my privileged position to keep working with those who make up my community, to support them the best I can through performance opportunities, professional development conversations, or simple messages of reassurance that things will be better soon and better for the future in general. I certainly didn't think it at the time, but I do think my teenage self would be stoked at knowing that I help creativity thrive for the community and that I'm still as invested as I was all those years ago in how this community lives and breathes.
Thank you, Sia Ahmad. We're going to be zipping back to Ngunnawal country in a few minutes after a detour to Wallumadegal country in Sydney's north, where pianist and composer Zela Margossian writes and plays her music. Zela studied classical piano from the age of 4, but for many, many moons, she's been head over heels for jazz, her own kind of jazz, a lot of it with her own ARIA-nominated Zela Margossian quintets. You hear jazz rhythms, you hear jazz harmonies in their music. You also hear bits of classical and folk songs from Armenia and beyond. Zela was the AMC's inaugural artist in residence in 2019. She's been commissioned by the ABC. Her next album, The Road, comes out in February. Zela Margossian.
Greetings. I am dialing in from Wallumadegal land. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I work and live, and recognize their continuing connection to land, water, and community. I pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. I would like to thank the Australian Music Centre for granting me this wonderful opportunity, together with 2 exceptional artists, Sia Ahmad and Bree van Reyk, to take part in Peggy Glanville-Hicks Address, presented, as you can see, in a special format this year. I feel extremely humbled, and I hope my modest address will spark some positivity during these uncertain times. It now has been almost 20 months since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the impact of the restrictive circumstances it created in people's lives is felt nationwide, and the livelihood of many has been compromised, especially evident in the music industry, which was one of the sectors affected the most. Challenging times necessitate shifting perspectives to cope and find new ways to endure hardship. I admire the dedication of artists in the music community who, when live music came to a halt and numerous productions were cancelled, devoted their time to create petitions and reach out to the government to ask for more support for the art sector. Live stream events, online collaborations, remote teaching all became part of the new norm, as adapting is key to survival. But when human interaction is restricted and limited, the true essence behind why we make music is lost. Each performance with my band, Zela Margossian Quintet, is different because of the energy in the room. And each interaction with an audience is unique, which translates into the music. Consequently, with the absence of a live audience, it was very challenging to find the energy to spark that special dynamism which is almost only created in a live setting. The band and I also had plans on releasing a second album when the pandemic hit. It was difficult to face an uncertain future and not be able to plan ahead, which compromised the momentum of productivity and being present. Last year also, in August, amidst the global pandemic, I witnessed my beloved Beirut, where I was born and raised, experience one of the most horrific explosions ever recorded in modern history. A month later, a part of my ancestral homeland, Artsakh, spiraled into a gruesome war. I was heavily burdened by extreme emotions of sadness, and I shared the sorrow of the Lebanese and Armenian people. However, through those difficult emotional times, I gained an important perspective. This, compounded by the COVID-19 situation globally, gave me a new outlook to deal with issues that I was facing. And through that realization, I felt an immense gratitude, a gratitude of living in a country where I feel safe, where I never have to search for clean water, face food shortages, and have access to a functioning health system, to name a few. This gave me the strength to continue and create. I realized that it wasn't only a matter of endurance, but a time to reconnect with our passions behind our impulses to create, to appreciate what we took for granted, and strengthen the relationships with musicians fostered during the challenging times. The future might seem uncertain for a while to come. However, I can see a light ahead. Witnessing the perseverance of musicians during these challenging times, their creativity with presenting their music content online, music teachers devising interesting ways to present their lessons remotely, and festival and venue directors going to extremes to keep serving music to the community and supporting artists as much as possible, is proof that there is a collective will to keep the music alive. It's a well-known fact that we have a big challenge to tackle, a lack of proper government funding for the arts. However, on the other hand, we should embrace what we already have, which makes the creative community blossom: diversity. Diversity is an essential part in any community and is a great binding force in the creative sphere of the arts. Specifically, in the music sphere, diversity brings about unique relationships through music. Exchanging ideas and learning from one another's backgrounds, personal stories, cultural heritage, and musical traditions bring about distinct collaborations and interesting projects. Contribution creates connection, and connection creates a network of support, which is essential during uncertain times, such as the one we are experiencing right now. Speaking of my own experience, my band is an indication of that fact. The mere existence of the quintet is a testament that cultural diversity can result in a beautiful, harmonious outcome. I am grateful for the opportunity I had after moving to Australia to explore all my cultural and musical identities and create something that not only represents me, but opens the door to similar stories to unfold and continue the traditions of cultural diversity on which the land we live on has embraced for thousands of years. Touching back upon gratitude, I would like to say thank you to each and every individual in the music industry who accepted me, who cared about me, taught me, supported me, and appreciated my music. That's why I consider myself lucky that I am a visitor on this exceptional land, my third home, and I am thankful and grateful for the beauty it offers me. It is our mission through music to spread love, unity, and healing, especially to those who need it the most. Thank you.
Thanks, Zela Margossian. We'll catch you in conversation after Bree van Reyk, percussionist who's also dialed in from Ngunnawal country. Bree is a drummer, percussionist, composer, and sound artist. If you caught her opera last year, Invisible Bird, you'll know how warm and joyous and funny her music can be. She has played with everyone from Gurrumul to the Australian Chamber Orchestra. She was the composer in residence in 2019 at the Canberra International Music Festival. And her music has been commissioned by festivals, orchestras, galleries, and another enormous pile of impressive names. Bree van Reyk.
Thank you, Vanessa, for that lovely introduction, and thanks everyone for being here and for listening and sharing. Thanks to Sia and Zela. It's lovely to hear. It's been lovely to connect with you throughout this process and to hear what you have to say. Like Sia, I'm also here on Ngunnawal country today, which is where I grew up. I'm at my friend Jess Green's house. I don't play double bass. I don't play guitar very well, but I think that they look quite pretty. This Ngunnawal country is also where I grew up, and it's where I've had so many of my formative musical experiences. As Sia said, I didn't realise you're also from Belconnen. I grew up in the area called Belconnen, listening to punk rock in my bedroom, playing in the garage. I played with my friend Jess Green and Zoe Houtman, who many of you will know, in the garage when we were 16, 17, playing with the Canberra Youth Orchestra, playing in punk rock bands at all ages shows, driving around in my parents' car listening to Sonic Youth. And actually I drove from my parents' house here this morning and I listened to Sonic Youth again. And I was really inspired when we've had a couple of chats before these sessions, just hearing Sia talk about how important punk rock has been to her. And it certainly has been to me. And I was thinking about what I would wear today, and I thought, I'm going to wear my Sonic Youth jumper. It's not what I would normally wear, probably to a classical, I wouldn't wear it on stage in a classical gig. Or maybe I wouldn't used to, but maybe I will now. In thinking about preparing for this talk and what I wanted to say, I thought about many different things. And one thing that came to mind was an online event, one of the few online events that I did actually go to during this last 18 months or so, which was something that my friend Claire Cooper was part of. Claire is a beautiful harp player and improviser, and also like a futurist designer or something at the University of Technology, ETS, or Sydney, I can't remember. Anyway, Claire was part of the Zoom event, which was also with a lot of artists from Ireland and all around the world, who did a lot of community-based art. And they were sharing their art, and Claire, when it came around to her, she said, I'm really torn about what to do because I'm a control freak, but I also love improvisation. And she was trying to decide whether she would read the speech that she'd written beforehand, or whether she would just play the harp. And I was like, please, please, please play the harp. And she did. But I really loved that idea of, and she did, and it was beautiful to hear. It was actually one of the most moving things I've seen during the pandemic, especially online, just to have this spontaneous performance. What I will say is a combination of being somewhat controlled and wanting to explain myself properly, and also just loving to freestyle it. When I got here and I spoke to my friend Jess, as I said, about this talk, and she asked if there was a theme about it, and I explained there sort of was, and she was like, oh, well, I don't want to hear what anyone has to say about COVID, but I have had some profound thoughts during this time. And I think that we all have, and I know I certainly have. And if I think back to the start of the pandemic, there were some major events that were very profound for me. As Vanessa said, my opera, The Invisible Bird, was supposed to premiere last year, but it got cancelled. It was probably one of the first events to get cancelled, certainly in Australia. It was supposed to be in late March. But fortunately, the Sydney Chamber Opera, who were premiering in it, had already arranged the documentation to happen. So we're actually able to get through and film it. And the cast did an amazing job, and the whole crew did an amazing job of filming it on basically what would have been the first day of Tech Week, so a week out from the opening. And as a result of that, it was really devastating at the time. I worked for a long time on that, and I was looking forward to seeing it. But in the end, it's actually been shown, it's been watched probably over 9,000 times now. So we wouldn't have had that kind of audience reach before. So that's really exciting, and the film turned out beautifully. So that was a positive thing. I also thought about very early on in the pandemic, I finally got around to finishing an album that I've been working on since I got a grant to do it when I basically got a grant from the Australia Council, and then I found out I was pregnant, and my daughter, let's just say my daughter is almost 5, and the album will probably be coming out just after her 5th birthday. But I finally got time to finish that album during the start of the pandemic. And ironically, it's an album really about being together. It's called Superclasses, and it's got all these moving parts from all these improvised performances from many of my closest friends and musical colleagues over the years. And we had all these recording sessions with bringing people together, recording in the room together and making a really spontaneous and live and empathetic sort of responses to the musical compositions I'd presented. And then the irony was that I was editing them all on my own, and I couldn't see any of these people for months and years, and we certainly couldn't perform it. And then thinking about where we are now, I guess I'm hoping to perform again soon, maybe in a couple of weeks. But it's been a really difficult time for everybody. And when I think about what I want to do with music, it's what I want to do with myself and my life. And I need to be able to nourish myself and others. And I'm trying to find more and more ways to do that through music, rather than just ploughing ahead with music and trying to nourish myself in other ways. I saw a really beautiful blog post recently on an Instagram account that I really enjoy from Adrienne Marie Brown, who is a writer of a book called We Will Not Cancel Us and Other Dreams of Transformative Justice. And she's also written a book called Pleasure Activism, The Politics of Feeling Good. And she has podcasts and a very funny Instagram, which is like, sometimes it'll be cat memes and sometimes it'll be zombie memes and sometimes it'll be a beautiful blog post like this, which is called Not Busy, Focused, Not Busy, Full. So this is Adrienne Marie Brown. This is a poem or a reset. You keep telling me you know I am busy, and then you ask me for something, and I want you to know I am not busy. No, with all of these boundaries, I have space to write, to take care of my body, to hold my loves tightly in my many, many hands, so we can somehow make it through the rest of our lives. And that's the opening of the blog post, and I would love to read the whole thing, but I won't. But I think that question is, for me, like, how will we make it through the rest of our lives? And that's what I've been certainly thinking about a lot. And this time has sort of shown me that I miss people, and I miss making sound with and for people. And I want to be slow and sustainable, and I don't want to be busy anymore. The final lines of Adrienne's blog post are, I hope to never be busy again. I owe this quiet breath to my grandmother. I am creating at an astounding rate, and some of it I even write down. Some moments I get so still, I can sense how it is all connected, and that tissue is love. And I know my love could never be wasted or too small a contribution. I say yes when love leads. I say yes when there's enough time to do it well. And sometimes even then I am not there, because life showed me another way to love, and it was irresistible. Everything that happens between that opening and closing part of the blog is beautiful, and I will put it in the chat at some point, a link to that post. But I think this idea of what is irresistible to me what is she finding that's more irresistible than doing the writing or doing everything else? And I thought about what's been irresistible to me recently. And also the other side of that is like what I will not resist. So I've been thinking, and I've realized that I will not resist being aware of my privilege. I will not resist acknowledging it. And I will not resist finding ways to use my heart and mind and ears and hands and time and creativity in order to divest and disperse my privilege is irresistible to me. The past 18 months have been really hard for musicians and artists, but we're used to it being hard. Like when this all started, I said to some friends, I was like, well, everyone's freaking out like they've lost their job, but we never even have jobs anyway, or we're just making it up. And even if you do get a gig, we don't tend to earn a whole lot of money. So I think that musicians are actually fairly well placed to deal with this situation because we are very resilient. If you've made it this far, if you're 43 like I am and you've lived most of your life in Sydney as a musician, you can cop it for a while. But for many other people, life is non-stop hard, and it's non-stop isolated, and it's non-stop uncertain. Particularly in this country we know that's the case for Aboriginal people, in many places, in many parts of the country, that they continue to be far more affected by poverty, by ill health, by problems from violence and systemic violence and racism and all of these things, that's all non-stop. And so I think about that a lot. I think about my place. I'm studying in the Composing Women program at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music, and I'm extremely privileged to be there for so many reasons. I'm sponsored on a government scholarship. My tuition is covered as part of that. I'm extremely privileged because I have amazing access to the brilliant mind and heart of Lisa Lim, who has been so inspiring and such an amazing leader. And part of the program there, it's in this Composing Women program, myself and a colleague were given the opportunity to go to assist on a research trip with Georgia Curran in Yuendumu. And Georgia Curran's she works with the Warlpiri women around Yuendumu, which is out of Alice Springs, documenting and helping them to make use and document and make available the Yawayu songs. And through that process, I met some people who run a young women's music program at PAW Media in Yuendumu. And that's a new program that Grace Marshall and Ben Green up there have been setting up, where they realise there's not many Warlpiri people, young Warlpiri people working at PAW in the sound and music departments. So they wanted to encourage the girls to work in there by maybe learning to play some instruments and get involved in a band program. And so I've been trying to support them there. One of the things that happened through that was I helped them to organise a crowd fundraising campaign which raised $18,000 to buy musical instruments for those young women. The program is called Piriji Kanda Kanda, which means strong women in Warlpiri. And I want to have an ongoing connection with that. Well, I do have an ongoing connection. And what the pandemic has shown us is that we, like it or not, we can Zoom in, and there are great benefits to that. And one of the things that I want to do ongoing with that is to provide one-on-one lessons for young women in remote communities with musicians like myself and my friends, and hopefully sponsored from crowdfunding. Something else that I will not resist doing is I will not resist continuing the act of opening my eyes and responding to the inequality and discrimination I see, calling out and making positive action towards the destruction of sexist, misogynistic, racist, trans-hating, gay-hating systems and behaviour is irresistible to me. So again, with the CW, the Composing Women program, when I started there, I had a 10-month-old baby, and my awareness of the world has changed so much since having her, and imagining what her life will be like and how much may or may not change during her lifetime. And when I first walked into the conservatorium, I went to the library, and the first thing I saw was these 3 busts of these 3 pale, lifeless European men staring me down from the entrance to the library, which is such a beautiful place of learning and knowledge storing and sharing. And everyone told me it was Beethoven, Bach and Brahms. It's actually Beethoven, Liszt and Wagner. But I looked around and I realised there was no women. There was 2 more busts. There was another Beethoven, and there's no Sculthorpe. There's Sculthorpe. So there's 5 busts, there's 2 Beethoven and no women. So I decided to make a campaign to change that representation. And again, I worked very closely with Lisa Lim and my other colleagues in the Composing Women program. We came together and we thought about who we would like to see represented. We decided as a starting point that it would be Deborah Cheetham, that's who we would like to see represented. And we approached Deborah Cheetham, who many of you will know is an amazing opera singer, a composer, an academic, and activist. She led the opening of the Mardi Gras parade at one point a few years ago. She's an absolute legend and hero, and she was willing to be busted in this form. So earlier this year, we managed in between lockdowns to install the bust of Deborah Cheetham, which was made by my friend, very generously made by my friend, sculptor Anna Willie. And so now when you walk into the library, the first thing that people will see is this bust of Deborah Cheetham. And so I'm very happy to be opening my eyes to that view when hopefully we can get back into the library again. What I will also not do is I will not resist listening to and trusting myself And part of this is trusting my knowing that most of the systems and philosophies that our culture is based on are damaging, patronising, unequal and unjust, and they need to be reevaluated and changed. I think it's great that AMC has taken a change to this format, to the format of this address this time, and I'm thankful that they make a courageous decision to just say, hey, we've always done this, let's do something else, let's open it up to 3 people, and then we get a wider range of perspectives. I think that's really beautiful thinking. And for me, I think a lot about just basically turning everything upside down. I just feel like, if anyone's, I just feel like basically I sort of just blame the patriarchy for almost everything. And I just think, what if we just like shifted it all upside down and thought of it the other way around? And somehow for me, this has ended up in my most valued and nourishing creative experience from the past few years now, is playing a plank of wood, which is a 2x4 plank of wood. It's not even one, it's just whatever one I happen to have lying around. It's not special. You can get one from Bunnings if you're interested. You can also just probably find one lying around in the back lane, or you could go to Reverse Garbage or the Bower, or just wait for council to pick up a plank of wood. I play it with sticks because I know how to do that, and I know that wood on wood makes a good sound. It's an unspace for me, so it's often an unloved, like a discarded piece of leftover material, a remnant from something else. It's generic raw material. It's non-specifically musical, but it contains a huge array of naturally occurring harmonics, as every sounding object does. It's the exact opposite of a Stradivarius, but to me, it's equally rich and valid. And I can use my hands and sticks to play it, but the actual techniques of doing so are completely different and changed. So it's very different to any other instrument, percussion instrument I've learned formally before. The practice that I do on it is slow. It's led by my body and by listening. So my practice doing that is to sit down at the instrument, to wait, to listen, to feel what my body, my hands want to do, and to start to make a sound, and then just continual process of waiting, listening, and moving. And I think that that's really how I see myself moving through the world now, is to be aware of what's happening, to listen to what's happening, and to find a way to move through it. And then I find a new possibility on this plank of wood, something, I chase a particular harmonic or I chase a particular sound, and then I do that again. And it's renewing. It's a very simple process, but that's how I want to move forward. And I think it's a beautiful, slow process, and it's a meditative process that I want to use to affect and to colour all my work from now on. As I said, hopefully I will play this irresistible plank of wood sometime soon. And actually, I'm hoping that it will be at the Peggy Glanville-Hicks house in a few weeks' time for a small audience, playing with my friend who's the current resident, Aviva Undine. So thanks to Peggy for donating her house, and maybe I could see some of you there playing a plank of wood. Back to you, Vanessa.
Thanks, Bree.